This week, grab your calendars and let's head to the front lines where we're talking everything from women's rights to Saudi ties to spring break. And in a special extended interview, we bring you the Bank Whistleblowers Group, who has a plan to unfuck our economy based on years of experience going up against the largest financial institutions in the country. But first, I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of juggling dreams. I'm tired of clickbait and share this meme, please. I'm tired of asking, of hoping, that Sisyphus sloping, up and then down, up and then down, up and then down. Have you heard this before? Up and then down. The rock hits the bottom, but ground ain't rock bottom. Keep trying harder, push, you'll get stronger, wait a bit longer. I'm tired of waiting. For no-shows, for Godot, for progress in this relentless cage of echoing nonsense. I'm far past the stage where first so enraged I grasped at some sense and asked for some change. I'm tired of thinking. That thinkers won't hide, won't bury the truth neath the smokescreen removed, won't hide behind words, make flimsy shields to batter and beat the kids on the street, pushing for futures that aren't replete with despair. I'm tired of sleeping with gloom. This one-night stand that got out of hand and now we're together like a bride and a groom. I need some more room, some more space, a place where every step isn't laced, every bite doesn't taste like imminent doom. You say dramatic, but I feel pragmatic, sick, tired, and wasted, drunk on the sins that I do drink in, so lucid and sober that once my day's over, I reach for that wine, not so I find, but so I won't find. Alone with my soul, my mind coming home, I shut out the din, expel the world's sins, drink in the poetry flowing from glass, pass on the stash of what I should do to future and past. A pragmatic soul, tired but bold, you know, how I'll flip what now seems like a downer, a drowning sad moan, and leave you with hope and no optimism. Listen. I'm not selling potions or paranoid notions. You already know that this shit is broken, fixed by the chosen, up there still holding the reins. And we in our chains shuffle and sway. A few break away, the rest of us stay to fight another day. Yes, it's cliche, for good reason I say, because our own human history carves out the victory from what we believe as deep set in stone. But the people will topple any regime. Look around you and see. What dictator, empire, gleaming gold spires, what government has held onto power after that hour, those days, those months, and those years, when finally people see and they hear, when apathy's traded for our common faculty to unlock our chains, to raise up our fist, to say, yes, fuck this. To not sit like sticks in toxic sludge mud, shrug and think, fuck, I'm tired, I'm sick. Guess that's just how it is. It is how it is because we are this way. We cuddle our chains, smile, admire, aspire to be like the ones who won't set us free, who won't let us breathe, and we are the keys. It's so goddamn clear, like window pane glass, we smash into answers, shake off the pain of a truth we don't want but we need. So yes, I'm tired. Of all that I mentioned, these bones of contention are buried in shallow marked graves, and I dig them up with each evening's cup, then drown them till morning light breaks. Then freshly I take the dirt off those graves and dig my own way, from systemic slave to one of the hopefuls who fight and think, hey, change is decided, the sick and the tired will one day, yes, someday surely rise up. The empire's rise will fall like a stone, a Sisyphus roll, and here in this time we do hope that this certain change will happen while we hold the reins. I'm tired too. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. Just a quick little bibliography note, that last powerful line in this week's spoken word is not mine. Those are the words of Assada Shakur, Black Panther and Black Liberation Army member, currently living in exile in Cuba. This is but one of many powerful quotes from a woman who, as she puts it, has advocated and still advocates for revolutionary changes. And if you think the name sounds familiar, then yes. She is the aunt of Tupac Shakur, and though I'm not even scratching the surface of her life in this mention, I do highly recommend that you dive in, because her story is not only inspiring, but a pointed and shameful account of our injustice system. So now that we already have a quote of the day under our belt, let's head to the front lines to take care of some up and coming events before we hit this week's special extended interview. Let's look ahead a couple of weeks because next week there's a little anniversary special in store for you. It is almost our birthday, but before we get down to celebrating, we gotta get down to protesting. On March 2nd, the Center for Reproductive Rights is hosting a rally at the Supreme Court, where on that day, oral arguments will be heard in the case of Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstedt. It's basically asking the powers that be whether or not Texas is allowed to shut down nearly every abortion care provider in the state, because, something about the sanctity of life, I think, except for refugees or the homeless or kids on welfare or non-white kids or soldiers or innocent people on death row or anyone on death row or immigrants or, I don't know. Anyway, the background of this case is essentially loopholes. For many years now, the Supreme Court has upheld the ruling that it's a woman's choice to do with her own body as she wishes. Texas, and in fact several other states, are avoiding this pesky little detail by passing laws like HB 2. These place millions of dollars worth of unnecessary and random requirements on women's health clinics that offer abortions. The result, more than half of the 42 clinics, which, by the way, is already too few for a state that fucking big, more than half have already closed. And if the Supreme Court sides with these literal dicks, only 10 abortion clinics would be left in Texas, tentatively. Not to mention the repercussions this decision would have for other states like Mississippi and Oklahoma, where these traps, that's targeted regulation of abortion providers, have also been put into place. Now, there's an added wrinkle here, an added little plot twist that makes it that much more important that we show up in force on March the 2nd. Justice Scalia is dead. And I feel odd even saying his name and justice in the same breath. It's kind of like saying, I don't know, my friend, the KKK member. And before you send me hate messages about how I need to respect the dead, allow me to say, no. I only respect the memory of the dead when I respected the living human being that they were. Respecting the dead just to respect the dead makes as much sense as being pro-life and pro-war. Scalia was a racist, bigoted, sexist piece of shit. And if you need proof of that, Google that shit. But Scalia's death could be a problem in the upcoming Supreme Court decisions. As of now, there are 8 Supreme Court justices, and considering the fact that right-wing nutbags have vowed to block any nominee of Obama's, I doubt that number will change by March 2nd. So, here's how it goes. If the court decides to vote on this case and there's a clear majority either way, fine. But if there's a tie, the only 2 options are to either let a lower court ruling stand or to wait for Scalia's replacement. And in this case, letting the lower court's ruling stand would be like letting Scalia live on from beyond the grave. So, March 2nd. Show up in force, grab some friends, grab some purple, and if you can't make it, fear not, just grab your computer and join the fight for women's rights online. We will post a link online with all of the information about the event, so mark your calendars and look out for that. Moving on, later that week, Code Pink will be hosting a summit on Saudi Arabia, examining the policies of the sick, twisted country and their cozy best bud ties with our own empire. The summit will bring together scholars, activists, lawyers, writers, journalists, and more to foment powerful and pointed discussion, planning, and action in the name of peace and justice. Speakers include members from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, author and activist Chris Hedges, Middle Eastern activists and journalists, and more. The price to attend is based on a sliding scale of your financial means, and students can go for free. For more information on this event and to get in touch with organizers, visit codepink.org/2016 Saudi Summit. Finally today, before we move on to a special interview, let's talk spring break, the kind that doesn't involve dickbags doing keg stands. or herpes. Between March 6th and March 14th, activists in Cove Point will be hosting a spring break action camp, complete with trainings, teach-ins, roundtables, and a special foray into kayaktivism with the folks from Backbone Campaign that helped blockade the Shell rig in Seattle. Basically, one badass spring break. You're by the water, you're with friends, you just don't have to deal with asshats or herpes. Registration is open, and anyone who isn't a cop or a corporate tool is welcome to attend, regardless of how much activism experience that you already have. Check out covepointspringbreak.org for more information. Okay, so now that we've wrapped up some of the upcomings, allow me to introduce you to this week's special extended interview. Bank Whistleblowers United recently announced themselves as a new collection of financial industry whistleblowers offering up more than just alarm bells. Because let's face it, at this point, we know shit's fucked up. What makes these guys different is that they have a proposal. A complete, pointed, straightforward, nonpartisan, no bullshit proposal that would not only rein in Wall Street, but would bolster our economy from falling into the same financial crisis that we saw less than 10 years ago. Which, by the way, is on its way to a sequel. Bill Black is one of the bank whistleblowers, and he sat down with us last week to talk about the background, the present, their plan, and the future of our economy. Take a look. The Bank Whistleblowers Group, it's made of financial experts that you write are unemployable because we spoke truth to power and committed the one unforgivable sin of being repeatedly proven correct. Talk a little bit about this group and briefly explain what your various backgrounds are, how you blew the whistle, and why you came together to form this group.
Sure. So Michael Winston was the best-known whistleblower at Countrywide. Countrywide was the largest home lender in the United States, and it was a front-to-back fraudulent operation at the top levels. And this was a problem. Michael Winston was the only one of us that was actually in the C-suite level from time to time. He was in, from the perspective of our group, a unique position to be able to see the rot at the top and to try to stop it. And of course, that didn't go very well. He got involved in the lawsuit and won big in front of a jury. And a court of appeals, which isn't supposed to invade the jury's province in fact-finding, reinterpreted all the facts and ruled against him. And then by that time, Countrywide was owned by Bank of America, and they came after him, for an extra pound of flesh to get fees and all those type of things. So basically pushed him towards bankruptcy for, again, the high sin is being right when the really powerful are wrong and fraudulent in this case. So Richard Bowen, also very high level, executive vice president at Citigroup, one of the 2 or 3 largest financial institutions in the world. He is an accountant by training, does what we call underwriting, which is you're supposed to look, are the loans prudent? Are you likely to get repaid? So Citigroup buys $50 billion in mortgages a year during this run up to the crisis. And it buys it without doing any underwriting before it buys. It has Dick Bowen's folks look after the fact. And so they look after the fact. They've already bought the $50 billion, and they say 40% of this stuff has false, what we call representations and warranties. In other words, when you sell something, you have to say it meets the following quality standards, and 40% didn't. Now that's, Katie bar the door disaster. And it wasn't just little stuff, the false statements, the lies in plain English, were about really important things like what is the borrower's income? How much is the real market value of the house worth? And Bowen being Bowen, and by training, he did what he's supposed to do. So he says, this is a big problem. And he starts alerting his bosses. And have I mentioned that virtually all of this 50 billion a year is sold to Fannie and Freddie, which is to say all of us get to pay for it when Fannie and Freddie go glug, glug, glug as a result of all of this. And so it's 60%. And now Richard Bowen is really upset. And being Richard Bowen, he starts sending emails and mail messages to all the senior folks in the chain above him, putting them on notice what they're finding, right? And then they look again and it's up to 80%, right? So to go the story to where you know it's going to go, Richard Bowen, having been proved correct, and because he got it right and did the right thing in terms of morality and integrity, and it was actually good for the bank, but not for the senior officers, they retaliated against him, and eventually they force him out as well. And then we have the regulatory side. And Gary is an attorney who was at the Securities and Exchange Commission, who was just doing his job, right? And he was supposed to look at something. He looked at it, looked fishy, started to do what we call discovery in the law biz, which is just getting the documents and such. And then his bosses decided to kill the thing, even though he was finding suspicious stuff. And being our kind of person, he said, no, this is not right. And so they started destroying the documents. And being our kind of a person, he said, that's not right. And he blew the whistle externally at that point to members of Congress and the media and such. The Congress, of all things, actually did a real hearing, not a political witch hunt, in which they said, this guy, Gary, is right. And the inspector general did the same type of thing. So looks like the system is working, right? And they say, yes, these people did bad things. And they ultimately negotiate one of their useless settlements in which, no one has to admit anything, but they agree that he's right. And they make his life miserable and he's out. Now, I'm a little odd person out in that I come from a different era, the savings and loan debacle, when we actually had regulators and we actually prosecuted. And we got over 1,000 felony convictions just in cases designated as major by the Justice Department. And we hyper prioritized them against what were actually the worst thieves in America. Went up against the best criminal defense lawyers in the world. They'll spend money like water to keep the CEO out of jail. And we had a 90% conviction rate. So when we hear you can't do anything, it's just impossible to prosecute bankers, we go, no.
Not so.
No, not true. This is how you do it. We know how to do it. You not only don't have to reinvent the wheel, what you actually have to do is remember there is a wheel of justice, right?
I like that.
Unlike The Big Short, when we see problems, we don't try to make a profit. We try to stop the problem because it's going to hurt America.
So the plan that you've constructed, because as I understand it, you've constructed a plan that's not just like sort of suggestions, but it is like strict. It's basically a plan that can be followed, and as I understand it, implemented by the president in less than 60 days without congressional approval. Can you talk a little bit about this plan that you guys have constructed?
Yeah, so there are two big things. One is the plan, and the other I'll do super short, is the campaign pledge. So again, one of the things that was really different in the savings and loan debacle is we actually prosecuted the elites that led the crimes. And as soon as we did that, indeed, as soon as we brought administrative enforcement actions where we would make public the fraud schemes, politicians would rush to give back the money that they got in political contribution from the frauds. And if they delayed even a day or two, they were just crushed by the public and the media. Well, nowadays, as I said, the Justice Department says in print, this entity ran one of the largest frauds in the history of the world, like Bank of America, to take a non-random example. And politicians rush to get money. So we say, hey, pledge all candidates to stop taking money from the financial felons. Duh, right? On top of that, then, as you say, we have most of what we do is really practical stuff. So we want nothing that requires new legislation and nothing that requires rulemaking, even, because now to put my academic hat on, the one thing that's most distinctive about the Reagan and Bush appointee judges is not how they rule on discrimination cases, it's how they rule on business cases. They are staggeringly pro-business in these things. And so you can see that they're trying to destroy all effective rulemaking by saying you haven't done enough cost-benefit analysis the way we, the conservative pro-business judges, want that cost-benefit analysis to be done, which, surprise, always is in favor of business. And by the way, they never require cost-benefit analysis when you deregulate. Only when you try to protect the public do they require it, right? Most of what we do is oriented towards reestablishing a rule of law on Wall Street, where the rule of law has been destroyed for the elite bankers. But another big chunk is, you really need to get rid of these systemically dangerous banks, which, by the way, they won't even use honesty. They call them systemically important, like they deserve a gold star. But but the real definition is, and I'm quite serious about this, you can even find this, for example, on the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis's website, and they're ultra conservative, is these are banks that when, not if, when the next one blows up, it will cause a global financial crisis. And there are ballpark 25 of these in the United States, and outside the United States, there are another 30 to 35, right? So we are rolling the dice just in the United States roughly 25 times a day, and elsewhere about 35 times a day, as to which one will first fail next and cause a global crisis. And it'll probably take others down as well, or require tens of trillions of dollars of bailouts again. Either of them very bad things. So we want to get rid of those. We think it's absolutely critical. You can use the existing authority that we've had as regulators for over 25 years, to set what are called individual minimum capital requirements. And that's a lot of jargon, but what it simply means is we are supposed to look not generally at banks, but at the specifics of the banks and say, you endanger the entire economy. Your capital requirement is not 10%, it's 70%. And if you do that, they will shrink to the size where they no longer pose a global systemic risk, and that is good for everyone. Second thing, in terms of time, I'll limit it to, is Glass-Steagall, right? So there's a lot of phony stuff out there about Glass-Steagall that it had nothing to do with the crisis. Simply not true, but also irrelevant, because you don't just prepare to fight the last war, right? You get ready for the things that can cause crises. And among the things are investment banking, which is precisely what by destroying Glass-Steagall, we've now allow federal deposit insurance, which is to say us, we stand behind this, to ensure investment banking where you have an ownership position.
So, would this, if this was, say, implemented, in the next year or so, would that stave off the next crash?
The getting rid of the systemically dangerous institutions and the Glass-Steagall portions are the best things going forward in terms of dramatically reducing the risk of that crash and reducing the severity. But we don't control the rest of the world. As I said, there are 35 ballpark systemically dangerous institutions in the world.
So final question. You talked about reinstalling the rule of law on Wall Street, and I think this is a question that comes up with a lot of usually naysayers who say why bother, is the question of, okay, you get this one thing done, you past this one hurdle, but then how do you ensure that that's enforced in the future?
Right. So this is exactly what needs to be asked. And so the first answer is I've used a few myself in this talk, but we overwhelmingly reject any military metaphors. You can't win a decisive battle against corruption and elite, fraud, and political influence. You can try to structure things so that it's easier to fight these things. And that's, again, our stuff is very practical in trying to change these structures, try to institutionalize more a culture that's going to object. But yeah, in the end, I can put a leader in charge of the Justice Department who's going to prevent prosecutions. So in the end, the only any kind of assurance is us, the people, calling these folks to account. As I said, it used to happen in part because we made public the number of criminal referrals. And so people could see, by the way, we made over 30,000 criminal referrals in the savings and loan debacle, which is 1/160th the size in losses of this crisis. In the current crisis, they made 0 criminal referrals. They even eliminated the function of the criminal referral coordinators, which, by the way, is one of the practical steps that we have in our plan to reestablish this. Nothing wins forever, but that's life. You know, life is a really big struggle, and we have to wage it.
For more information on Bill Black and Bank Whistleblowers United and to see their 60-day plan, check out the links at the end of the show or in the written description of the video. And that will wrap up this week's Dose of Dissent. Thank you so much for watching. Please spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. As always, check out the last slide to see all of the sites that I mentioned in this week's show. And be sure to tune in next week for a special anniversary edition. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. From the Devil's Den, good night and act out.